and our brother Larry Johnson is here with us from Moscow. How's it going, Larry? You're breaking the
Hey,
code.
hey, what's with your shirt? Come on. If I'm wearing a suit and tie, you got to wear one. No, I'm glad to see you're looking relaxed and stylish. Just a warning to viewers: Professor Morandi will show up in a shirt. He'll put some competition on you. I made sure of that.
Great. Larry, let's start. I want to start with the case of Middle East with Israel.
Uh-huh.
Israelis attacked Gaza more than 120, bombs, aerial bombs. And it seems that Israeli media reports that following the resumption of Israeli military operation in Gaza, the courts have postponed Netanyahu's court testimony. That should have been held this week, Larry.
Yeah, yeah.
And what's going on with these new attacks in Gaza, Larry?
You mean the peace process is not working? That the 3,000 year solution to the Gaza problem didn't take? Oh my God! Thank God I was sitting down. I might have passed out from the shock. Okay, enough of my sarcasm. You know, I said last week that this was a bogus show. Uh, as soon as they got the living hostages released, Israel was going to start up again. Well, guess what? Israel started up again, looking for any excuse. Um, they're complaining, oh, you're not returning all the dead bodies. Well, that's because they're buried under tons of rubble created by the Zionists who bombed the hell out of Gaza. So, this they're going to they've shut down supplies going in. Starvation's going to continue, and the rest of the world's going to, sit on their hands and do nothing. And the genocide of the Palestinians will continue, unfortunately.
Donald Trump, he was talking about Hamas killing civilians and people in Gaza. It seems that he was talking about those people who were somehow fighting for Israel, these
Yeah.
ISIS, these gangs. Who are these people? What do we know about them?
Well, what we know is that they too are some radical extremists, but they were co-opted, paid for by Israel. In this, in the same way that Israel cooperated with ISIS in Syria, with Al Jalani, now known as Al Shara. Um, and Israel's Israel's not had any strict standard about dealing with Islamic extremists. They'll deal with them, and they can offer them money. And I'm sure these people, they were well compensated, and they were promised, "Hey, we'll keep you alive." And Hamas seeking retribution. Again, people are surprised, shocked by this. So it's just, Israel's looking for an excuse to go back in and destroy the Palestinians. Witkoff and Jared Kushner supposedly are flying over to work on disarming Hamas. Hamas is not going to disarm. They're not suicidal. So they're going to continue fighting as long as they can. And, both Palestinians and Zionists will continue to die.
Have you watched the 60 Minutes, the interview they had with Steve Witkoff together with Jared Kushner?
No, I have not. I saw it popped up, but
The
I haven't.
tone, Larry, the overall tone of the interview is so positive. You feel that there's so much hopeful. These two, they're so much hopeful about the future of the deal that they've done it. They feel that it would work. It seems to me, Larry, with the new attacks, it seems to me that the whole plan is to somehow tamp down the pressure on Netanyahu.
Mhm.
They help him a lot with the prisoners getting back to Israel. Was that the case? Do you feel the same way, or they're gonna do something? They have some. So, is there any sort of leverage after all, Larry? Because after this peace plan, many people are arguing that Donald Trump is showing some sort of leverage on Netanyahu. Is that the case?
No, no. Uh, he can tell Netanyahu. All he had to do is tell Netanyahu, not one single bomb. Do not drop a bomb on any place in Gaza, or we're cutting off all aid. He's not going to do that. He's bought and paid for. They're completely compromised by the Zionists. So, uh, you know, they will continue.
And is there anything for those people, those countries who have signed the agreement to do about it, or it's all about the United States doing something separately?
Oh, the you mean all those other countries that were sitting behind Trump at Sharm el
Yeah.
Sheikh? Like I said at the time, this was like being invited to a wedding, and but there wasn't a bride and groom. Israel didn't attend, and the Palestinians didn't attend, but all the other guests sat there. So they were returning my laundry.
Yeah.
So I sorry, I was on the phone. But
Huh.
no, they're um, I talked today with a journalist um, here in Russia, young guy named Abbas, um, and he's part Syrian, but he's born in Russia, um, and it conceded that you could have India, Russia, and China together could put enough pressure on Israel to make it stop the genocide, but for their own internal political reasons, they won't do it. So here we're left with, the United States can stop it in a heartbeat, absolutely, but again, they won't do it. So this genocide is going to continue, and Donald Trump he'll move on to something else. Maybe he'll try to tout his greatest peace plan for Ukraine and Russia as his next bit of theater.
Jared Kushner was asked by the interviewer, and in this interview, he was asked if how did he find the situation in Gaza, because he visited Gaza before breaking the deal between the two, and he said it felt something like a nuclear bomb,
Yeah,
being there and devastating and destroying everything.
made possible by who? Oh yeah, that'd be the United States by Joe Biden and now Donald Trump. Yeah, devastating like a nuclear bomb, and we are collaborators in that.
Then he said that then he was asked if it felt like a genocide. He said, no, no, not at all. And Steve Witkoff came in and said, absolutely not. What is
Yeah,
that,
those
Larry?
those those Palestinians love having bombs dropped on them, man. They love not having a home, living in tents that get set on fire. What are you talking about? Shame on them. I mean, it's despicable. But what do you expect? This level of dishonesty. A couple of real estate brokers, you know, the, they've got blood on their hands. They're complicit now, and they want to pretend that everything's hunky dory in Gaza land.
Yeah. Who are they protecting, Larry? The Trump administration? Is it Netanyahu? Is it Israel? Because if, after all, with all that said, if you are pro Israel, if you want to support Israel, you know that what's going on with these attacks are not going to help Israel, are not going to benefit Israel in a long run.
Yeah. No, look, Nima, this isn't about Israel. This is about Zionism. Those are two different things. Israel as a political entity, in theory, could exist within the boundaries that were established in 1948. But Zionism insists that there are no such boundaries, that from the river to the sea, from the Euphrates to the Mediterranean, the Nile, that belongs to Judea, Samaria, as promised in the Torah. And so there is no compromise to be had. There is no deal that they will accept that will allow Palestinians to have any access to that territory. We've seen already over the last 48 hours these Zionist settlers have attacked Palestinians trying to pick olives off of their olive tree, burning their cars, trying to kill them. So, I'd love to say, there's a solution here. The solution is the settlers are going to have to be locked up and removed forcibly, and that's not going to happen. So, Trump and team are committed to protecting Zionism, which is why Mike Huckabee's there. He's not Jewish, but by God, he's a Zionist, because this is part of, hey, man, we got to have this battle of Armageddon so Jesus comes back. Crazy stuff.
What's the funny thing, that in their theory of Armageddon, there is no place for Jews.
True. Yeah,
Yeah, this is unbelievable.
Hey, dude, if you're looking for logical consistency, do not consult the Holy Scriptures, as they're called. Both the Old and New Testament, they got two different versions. And the Jews like their version, and the Zionist Christians like their version, and the Muslims have a version too. So, everybody's got their own recipe for the end of the world and who comes back and who does what to whom. Instead of just saying, hey, if you want to believe all that, that's fine. Just, can we be nice to each other here without waiting for some mystical experience in the afterlife to tell us that we need to, treat one another with love and respect? Just a thought.
Larry, how do they feel in Russia about the situation in the Middle East? When you're there and you're talking with the people, do they feel that the new attacks are coming to Iran? They're going to attack Iran? Or what would be the reaction from Iran? Because as we know, is the situation between Iran and Russia, this sort of partnership is drastically improving. And
Right.
we had the head of Iranian Security Council going to Russia. We had the Russian delegation going to Iran today or yesterday. What is your understanding of that? What's your perception of that atmosphere in Russia?
They're not paying that much attention to it so far, what I've been able to discern. No, I had 6 separate conversations today with people, with only one of the 6, the young guy, Abbas, his last name is Abbas Juma. So he's a radio journalist on Pravda, and he's talking about it, but he's about the only one. There's just more preoccupation and focus on Ukraine and the special military operation.
Yeah. They didn't talk about the nature of the talks that between the Iranian Security Council, the head of Iranian Security Council, and Russia.
No.
Nothing of that sort came out.
No, I haven't been able to peruse the media here, so maybe something did. I just haven't seen it yet. I was caught up with all these different interviews, but what is just the fact that the Iranians are there meeting with senior Pentagon, Kremlin officials, that tells you everything you need to know. That Iran is now firmly embedded with the Russians and with the Chinese. So that's going to give both Israel and the United States pause before restarting any renewed attacks on Iran.
I think what's going on with Trump's so-called peace deal in Gaza and Palestine between Israelis and Palestinians, it's somehow is an important sign for Russians to look at it. So what's going on? What would be the outcome of any deal with the United States, Larry?
Well, they were excluded. Remember, at Sharm el Sheikh, no Russians, no Chinese, and no Mohammed bin Salman either. So this was all a Donald Trump show, and as such, the Russians, they're not invested in it. It's not their ball game. It's not their plan. And they didn't do anything to make it happen.
How you talk with many, you mentioned before coming to live, you mentioned you talk with some important military commanders in Russia.
Yeah.
How do they feel about the battlefield, Larry?
Oh, very good. Um, I've met with three uh, different people that are, one's like in charge of a military think tank. He was uh, in the Russian army, and then with General Abdi Alauddin uh, last night, and then another general today, Gurulov, and I lay
This
out.
this commander Alodinov was the guy who was in charge of the Kursk region, the battle in the Kursk region.
Correct. He's the one that came up with that operation that they climbed into a gas line big enough to crawl 13 to 15 kilometers,
Mm.
popped up out of it, and then attacked and destroyed the Ukrainian forces in Suja. So um, the war has clearly entered a new phase. The Russians are pressing attacks all along the line of contact from north to south, from Kherson in the north all the way to Zaporizhia in the south. That um, the Ukrainians are increasingly in desperate situation to try to hold them back. And this differs from what happened 2 years ago. 2 years ago, you would see Russian forces concentrated in one area. Like I think the first was Bakhmut, followed the second year by Avdiivka, or maybe I got them backwards. But they weren't at two or three locations fighting
Yeah,
at
it was
once.
Bakhmut and Avdiivka. Yeah.
Now they are, and they've got Pokrovsk surrounded, Kramatorsk. They've just Russia's moving. They're fighting in Dnipropetrovsk. They're fighting in Zaporizhia. So it's significant.
Yeah. Larry, Russia today, what do they talk? What is the atmosphere about the situation, the meeting between Donald Trump and Zelensky? Because the meeting, after all, you're looking at the reports on Financial Times, they're talking about Trump putting a lot of pressure on Zelensky.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that has anything to do with the reality, because after
Well,
all, you look at the meeting, it was all about Tomahawk missiles. So what's beyond the Tomahawk missiles? What
well,
is?
actually, one of my meetings, one of my interviews, was with the former prime minister of Ukraine. He was the prime minister from 2010 to 2014. Wonderful gentleman. And look, when Trump and Zelensky meet. Oh, wait a second. Hang on for a second.
Okay,
Someone's at the door. Stand by.
okay, yeah, Larry gonna be back. Just a second.
Good. Thank you. Sorry about that.
No problem.
Chocolate.
Yeah,
Oh,
you're so popular,
yeah, I
Larry.
guess, man. It's it's an excellent hotel I'm staying in now.
Yeah,
I was staying in a great one, the Metropole before this, but
this one is better. Yeah,
it's different.
yeah.
This one, the Metropole is a historic hotel. This one is quite modern.
Mm.
And so just it got a different feel. It's not, uh, not so much that one's better than the other. They're both spectacular in their own way. Uh, anyway, this uh, I've asked several people, and I said, "What concessions is Vladimir Putin willing to make?" The answer is none. So I mean, Putin, his basic demand is that Kherson, Zaporizhia, Donetsk, Luhansk, and Crimea are now those are permanent parts of Russia, the Russian Federation. It was done by vote, by plebiscite, even though Ukrainian forces still occupy parts of Donetsk, parts of Zaporizhia, and parts of Kherson. Uh, but they have to leave. That is Russian territory. That's Putin's demand. And as they leave, the NATO also has to pull out, cut off all ties with Ukraine. That's another demand that Putin has laid out. And there's going to have to be elections. There's, you know, Putin is not going to go in and say, "Oh, okay, we'll keep our troops in place at the line of contact where they are in Zaporizhia and Kherson, and let the Ukrainians stay where they are. We'll call a ceasefire." It's not going to happen. The people that believe that, okay, prove me wrong. But if Putin were to do that, uh, then Gil Doctorow would probably be right that there could be an uprising against um, Putin. But Putin's not going to do that.
Oh,
This one hardline general, uh, Gurulyov, Gurulyov said, the reason we won the Second Chechen War against the Islamic radicals was because of Vladimir Putin.
exactly.
I mean, he was like, mince words.
Yeah.
And I got him to talk about some of, he admitted, hey, the Russian military has made mistakes, and they've done some things that where they've learned their lessons. They've had a problem with bureaucracy in the past too. But what's really different this time about what Russia's doing is, and General Abdi Aludin was
Aladinov.
Aludinov. What we talked about last night was he recounted an experience where he went back to a headquarters and was telling, briefing them on, okay, this is what it's actually like on the front line. This is what we need. And it's like out of those kinds of discussions, they said, oh, okay, so you need fiber optic drones. Boom. Within a few weeks, they were producing fiber optic drones and getting them to the front. Now, previously, they might have been, especially in the United States, if you try to do that, it'd get caught up in contracting, and then this person would have to sign off, and then Congress would have to approve this money, and then it would take minimum months and maybe more likely years to see if you can get action. Whereas Russia's doing it within weeks. That's one of the big changes. So they don't anticipate much coming out of the meeting in Bucharest. That or I mean Budapest, out of
Budapest. Yeah.
Budapest, Hungary. Um, it's it's up to Trump to pull the plug on Ukraine because Russia's not going to stop until Ukraine is demilitarized and denazified. That is their position. Just believe them. Don't think that they're just saying that as a negotiating ploy. It's not a negotiating ploy.
Where is the European factor in the whole equation? Because do you feel the same sort of panic in Europe, the same way it was before, during the meeting between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin in Alaska, or the tone is somehow different?
Yeah, I haven't tracked it today or last 24 hours, but I would imagine it's going to be even more panicked because they have fewer options. What's Europe's making a lot of threats, but what are they going to do? What can they do? Not a lot. They're quite limited in their capability. So, um, I'm not sure they're going to get a lot accomplished. Or what? Let me put it this way: what should happen at the summit next week between Trump and Putin is first they say, okay, we're going to agree to make sure our embassies are fully staffed with an ambassador because the U.S. embassy in Moscow doesn't have an ambassador. It's it's, I'm near the U.S. embassy right now. Uh, the Russians want to have their own ambassador approved in Washington. Then opening direct flights between Russia, particularly St. Petersburg, Moscow, Sochi, and the United States. Get back to where you can travel. Americans could travel there. Uh, it is, what I'm participating in this week was sponsored by the International Unity Club. They want me to talk to as many different Russians as possible without any constraints. They don't say, oh, you can only discuss this, or you can only discuss that. I mean, hell, tomorrow I'm also meeting with the current head of the Communist Party of the Russian Federation. Gennady Zukharov, I think is his name. He's still an opposition political figure. Oh wait, I thought there were no opposition political parties in this authoritarian state of Russia. I mean, it just goes to show. Uh, and he's still convinced that socialism and communism is the best way forward for Russia. But he's in agreement with Putin's policy of the fight against the West, because the West is viewed as a threat, an existential threat to Russia. Uh, but like I said, I'm going to meet with probably uh, by the time it's done with over 30 different prominent Russian political leaders, business leaders, military leaders. I've done 3 generals yesterday. Um, I've done the head of there's actually a head of the Georgian party that's based here in Moscow. Great guy. His name is Mamaluka Pipia, and he has one the best is described as the best restaurant. It's a Georgian restaurant in Moscow. Food is unbelievable. But he's also active in politics in Georgia. Um, I met with a man named Alexander, who uh, he was one of the signatories to the Minsk agreement out of Donbass. So I'm getting it's not just a narrow section. Getting to talk to people with a variety of views, and you know they're all. I think the thing I could say in general is they're all sort of puzzled by the U.S. hatred of Russia. That's unfortunate because we've got a lot more in common with the Russians than not. In fact, I met with one young guy. He's your age. You're a young guy. He's like 44. Uh, he's the top athlete, a judo black belt, as well as an actor. He was an actor. Started in a couple of movies, but he's now a member of the Duma. And what's his thing? His thing is pushing to ban cigarettes, particularly for kids. He's big on the health kick, and there was another one who I dealt with who was against these globalists. That's his thing. So the Russians are like people anywhere, which they hold different political views. They have different passions and causes. The one guy that was the judo expert, I asked about if he had any religious upbringing. He said no. He said, my parents are communists. We didn't believe in God. So, oh, okay. But he said they still raised me with a moral value about right and wrong, and you know, and he's living it in his life. You can see it. He's made a priority of working with youth groups. Uh, that last guy I mentioned to you, Abbas, uh, he has set up a charitable foundation that works with wounded veterans out of the special military operation. So like I said, they're just uh,
Is that dictatorship in Russia? That's why you have a variety of.
yeah. Hey, it's a diverse place, and all this nonsense that Russia's on the verge of collapse and its economy's in the toilet. It's just a lie. It's a pure lie. Oh, Russia's got major gas lines because Ukraine has taken out the refineries. Yeah, Ukraine's damaged some refineries, and Russia's still producing gasoline and diesel, and there are no gas lines, at least here in Moscow. Now, I don't know about other parts in the country, but at least here in Moscow, having all you see is massive traffic jams from too many damn cars in the street. I'll tell you that much.
Yeah, it seems that Donald Trump is receiving false intelligence. He's talking
Yes.
about lines in Russia and people are
Yeah.
waiting. They don't have. Larry, these self-created, I think Donald Trump himself has created these problems that he gave, some sort of leverage to Europeans in terms of, increasing the defense budget from, the NATO defense budget from 2% to 5%. And one of the reasons that it seems that Europeans have some sort of leverage on Donald Trump. The other one is the the deal that they have with in terms of buying weapons and then send them to Ukraine. On the other hand, what Russia has on the table, we've learned about the new tunnel between the United States and Russia. It seems in tunnel we have a
Yeah.
railroad, and you know,
Yeah.
on the Russian part, we've seen tweets coming out and on X and new posts. What is that? Is that Russia that much interested in?
Well, all of those at this point are still blue sky, including. I mean, NATO's pledged. Oh yeah, we're gonna spend 5%. Have they actually allocated the money, appropriated it? To my knowledge, no. How many actual weapons have they bought? None that I'm aware of. So it's that promise from the old cartoon character Wimpy from the Popeye cartoons, which you probably are unfamiliar with. But Wimpy would always come up and say, "Hey, I'll gladly pay you Tuesday next week for a hamburger today. So give me the goods now, and I'll take care of you later." And invariably, he never paid. So Europe's making promises I don't think they can deliver on because their economies aren't doing well. They are barely, if they're growing, they're barely growing at 1% or less. The major economies, France, UK, Germany, and they could very well be in recession. Well, you're not gonna pony up, 5%, pay billions of dollars to the United States and to NATO.
You've mentioned the meeting that would happen between Donald Trump and Putin in Budapest in Hungary.
Hmm.
Is the Trump administration still seeking for a pause for the conflict, some sort of ceasefire, instead of having finding a substantial and a permanent solution for the conflict?
Yeah, I'm sure he's going to ask, and Putin will politely say no, niet, and then hopefully they'll move on to other things about repairing U.S.-Russian diplomatic relationships. We're much better off talking. The one thing that General Apti Aludinov said last night, and it was sincere. I mean, it was heartfelt because he was talking about his experience, his family's experience in the Chechen Civil War, where tens of thousands were killed, and the number of family members that he lost that were killed by extremists. And he says, I'm tired of the killing. This has got to end. We can't keep doing this to ourselves. So he's not sitting there harboring feelings of vengeance towards Ukrainians. He'd like to see the thing end. And I think that is speaks volumes right there. Because here's a guy, bona fide warrior, in the heat of battle, doing just incredible things, and he's saying, "Hey, let's find peace." Uh, that's what they want. Um, one of the guys I talked to today, though, he did express. Um, he was the guy that's on the health kick, and he just said, "Look," because he's been doing some anti-drug campaigns too. He goes, "Look at the kind of problems you have when you got a country whose leader is known to be a user of cocaine." He says it's not right, and so uh, you've got you got people with their heads screwed on straight. They know what their values are, and that's what they're pushing and promoting. And I think that, frankly, they're very good values for families. They want to live a normal life. They don't want to be slaves to drugs, alcohol, etc.
I remember during the Prigozhin mutiny, we've learned about this brigade. It's a brigade in Chechnya. It's Ahmad. They call it Ahmad, and something like that.
Yeah, it's the Akhmat. That's what Opti commands.
Yeah,
The Akhmat Battalion.
yeah. Are they involved in the war, or they're not that
Oh
much
yeah,
involved?
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, they're involved.
Yeah.
You know, they're still active. So but they also they do troop rotation. So after a period at the front, they get rotated to the back where they get a time to refit, recoup, and then rearm.
These Ukrainian that you mentioned that you talk with are those people who left Ukraine after the coup in 2014, or they left after the war broke
Oh,
out?
the one prime minister left after the coup in Maidan. Uh, he was actually born originally in Russia, but became the prime minister in um, Ukraine. I was trying to recall his name offhand. I've had so many different names today. Now, let me see. Stand by. I will tell you in heartbeat. I think it was Azarov. Yeah, uh, Nikolai Yanovich Azarov.
Yeah.
He served as prime minister of Ukraine from 2010 to 2014. He's People's Deputy of Ukraine in several convocations. Holds a Doctor of Geological Mineralogical Science degree. Sort of sounds like you, right? And is a professor. And he's resided in Russia since 2014. And he's co-chair of the International Unity Club. So that's sponsoring my trip over here.
How do they feel about Ukraine and the people in Ukraine? Do they see Ukrainians being radicalized by Zelensky and his administration, or they see some sort of hope within the Ukrainian society that could bring, this sort of mutual understanding between Russians and Ukrainians?
Well, as he pointed out in our conversation, he said, in 2010, the population of Ukraine was 57 million.
Oh,
He said today, population is 20 million.
wow.
You've lost more than half the population. And I pointed out to him, I said, I've got anecdotal evidence to support your claim. My dentist